So as we move into the session of the afternoon, needs and opportunities for big data and analytics in the social sciences and humanities, I'd like to introduce Vice President Research at Carleton, Nimal Rajapakse, who is going to run the session. Nimal.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to actually welcome all of you. It's a very nice day outside there. And the keynote speaker for this afternoon is Dr. Dominique Bérubé, and she's the Vice President for Research Programs at the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Dominique has extensive experience in research administration and also in digital humanities. So prior to joining SSHRC as the Vice President Research Programs, she served the University of Montreal for 8 years as the Associate Vice Rector for Research. She was also the Acting Vice Rector of Research. And prior to those positions, she was the Executive Director of Research Services and Commercialization. She has contributed a lot in terms of the improvement of the research administrative processes and the research infrastructure in Canada, basically leading very large infrastructure and strategic projects during her times at the universities. And then also, I think as far as this event is concerned, she has a very close fit with the topic of this event. She has been involved with actually integration of digital technologies into the research system. So for a number of years, from 2012 to 2015, she was the chair of the board of directors of a special initiative called Erudi. And it's actually offers centralized access to the majority of North American Francophone, North American universities actually access to the Francophone publications in social sciences and humanities. And then also, like integrating the new tools of digital humanities into the SSHRC disciplines. So you can see that she brings extensive experience, both in terms of research administration, as well as in terms of the topic that we will be discussing this afternoon. So without further ado, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome Dominique to deliver her keynote lecture. And after that, she will be facilitating a panel on digital humanities in social sciences and humanities. Thank you.
So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you this afternoon. It's a pretty different talk that I used to do when I participated in different opportunities in research infrastructure across Canada, because as was mentioned before, my previous role was way more involved in the development of different projects in research data infrastructure, and especially in everything that was linked to digital publishing. And maybe just a few words about that experience with digital publishing. It's what initially started by just developing and supporting the passage of the journals, the scientific journals, to a digital format, because otherwise they would just simply have died in a paper format for many of them. Evolved slowly in a large research data platform, because the project was really based on the XML scheme that we developed specifically to be able to build a database, and that's what exactly put the platform and the publication into the digital world and the digital landscape. So from journals, from the few of us who are in the sector of humanities and social sciences, you are aware that the journals, the Canadian journals are read like in a very small numbers, like from 100 copies to 5,000 copies at the maximum. And the Erudi platform did manage to bring about 24 million pages read every year. And now those Canadian Francophone journals are the most read literature in Canada across the world because of their integration within a platform and because, of course, of the structuring of the data that we're doing behind. So that very important step of curation and structuring the data is still fundamental. And it's a long 5-year discussion that I had when we were involved in the project. And it was about, the editor was disappearing and you could publish anything on your computer and everything. But no, the importance of the curation and the dissemination of the data is even more important than before if we want to be read and if we want to share our research. So those are principles that are very close to the heart of SSHRC. The dissemination and the sharing of the research. Of course, we're talking about of the context of a public funding. And I'm saying that it's a different talk. Yeah, it works. A different talk that I'm used to do because it's more of a corporate talk, So I'll be more telling you about the few things that SSHRC have been doing to support these kind of activities. But I'll be happy to get more involved in the panel in just discussing the challenges and opportunities that we have, I think, in the humanities and social science sector. So some very common, generalities, world experience and growth of information. I think what is more important is the connectedness of knowledge and the production of knowledge. You probably discussed this morning about the terms big data, what it means, big data. It has so many definitions now, and it's kind of in French, it's galvaudé, like a term that everybody uses, but to mean a very different thing. So, of course, you can think that big data is large size data set. And you call it big data when its manipulation and management, presents significant challenges, logistical challenges. But I think that big data is essentially notable because of the rationality to other data. And it's the opportunity that we have in humanities and social sciences. It's really this capacity to link data sets together and link information at all levels at some point. So SSHRC is already supporting in the last year, has been supporting different projects, especially through the Digging into Data challenge. There was previous competitions, and those are just 3 examples of projects that were funded by SSHRC, sort of a groundbreaking projects before we got involved into more initiatives. ArcLight, for example, is a data mining and visualization tool for film and media history. That allow users to analyze millions of pages of digitally scanned magazines and newspaper for trends related to a chosen subject. So it's really about large data sets and being able to do some sort of a transversal analysis across those very large data sets. The Impact Radiological Mummy Database is a typical digital humanities project, large-scale, multi-institutional, collaborative research project, which is devoted to the scientific study of mummified remains and the mummification traditions that produce them through non-destructive medical imaging technologies. So this really is about building that very large data set, which I guess was initially what was all about digital humanities, building those large data sets and building the tools that would allow you to exploit those data sets. What is evolving also is that we're now seeing a further field in digital humanities, which we call more digital culture. And the other one is also an example of that, digging into linked parliamentary data. It's an international project with the Netherlands also, and it was developing a common format for encoding parliamentary proceedings. Longitudinal study of parliamentary data, substantive case studies focusing on migration, left-right, ideological polarization, and parliamentary language. And they integrate that, of course, with modern ways of finding information about politics. So you can really see cross information on different platforms. So maybe some few questions that I find interesting when we think about big data in the humanities and social sciences. I think we have an especially big opportunity because of the potential, of course, of unstructured data. Science and health data are used to have structured data and everything, but the new algorithms that are being developed and especially apply to everything that is unstructured. So I think that's why we have such a big opportunity. So the thing that we're sort of asking ourselves is that, is it really going to change something? Because the scholars, they don't change that fast. I've been working in the university world for the last 20 years, so I know that scholarship evolves very slowly. And will it really change research? Some people pretend that it's changing everything. How does it change the definition of knowledge? How do you build knowledge? Do you build knowledge differently? Is the machine building knowledge for you? Or are you still influencing the way? Of course you are, but it's all questions that are interesting when we look at the big data. What is the impact on research processes? Profound ethical question is, if the data is available, do you have the right to use it? And for what use? There was an example that I read the other day about a group that found some freely available information about autoscarification and the link to suicide. And they discovered by the data that people that had attempted suicide had a tendency to also practice autoscarification. So they developed an intervention to reduce the autoscarification. And the impact of it is that there was more suicide, because the process of autoscarification was sort of a way of letting pressure out for those people. So they had to stop the intervention. So you really need to ask yourself, okay, the data is there, but the same ethical question exists. What can you really do with that kind of data? There are all kinds of questions that we can discuss in the panel after that, but obviously, one of the big issues that I discovered myself is that not every data set is compatible. I mean, it's a big question in the humanities and social sciences, because everybody influences the data they're collecting. It's their initial hypothesis, research hypothesis, that defines the way that they are going to collect the data and the way that they're going to use it. So the data is never totally objective. And if you think that just by putting it out there, you're going to be able to connect it to other data sets and produce new knowledge, is not proven, if not the curation job is not done with a lot of attention. So sort of what SSHRC is trying to do at that point, because we understand that it's essentially going to come from the community. Just like digital humanities developed within the community, everything that is related to dealing with big data and the management of data is essentially going to come from building the research capacity within the community. But we still think with the other agencies that we can have some influence on data management by promoting, in fact, by different policies, better practices in data management. So why are we interested particularly in data management? Essentially to realize the research potential. Data management is linked to research excellence. It has always been essential to, I said many fields of research, but almost all fields of research. Data management has always been important, but I think that with the growth in the size, the complexity, the internationalization of scholarship, tools offered also by digital technology, the explosion of tools and everything that you can do, proper data management is even more important than ever. New knowledge, as I said, new research processes. There's a big innovation potential that we can develop if we address this question. The question of research impact. We tend to think that better data management is going to be linked to competitiveness, whether it's economic, scientific, and scholarly. That's quite a big declaration, because it's not because you share your data that you're going to have more impact. Some say that you're going to have to be able to reuse data sets. To what level can you really reuse data sets? I mean, all researchers are going to say that would they use a data set of someone else that they have not controlled the way that the data has been collected? It's a big question. I'm not sure at that point that they would do it, and for very good reasons. I mean, it's the way that you collect your data, you feel comfortable and you trust your data to do your thing. There's also that open access, I'd say almost religion, which I adhere to, but which is still a religion, that researchers will get more credit and it will be cited more if they can share their data and they could put their data in the open world. Obviously, for anything that is related to, for example, artificial intelligence, they all share their data sets, they put them out, and they just compete to develop the best algorithm potential algorithm to exploit that data set. And yes, that works. Can we do the same in humanities and social sciences? That's an interesting also question. Research dissemination, I did mention it. It's sort of my own pet project. So you want to be read, you want to be seen in the digital world, you need to manage your data to put it out there. You can't just put a web page right there, put the data, or put your papers and think that people are going to just come. So the integrated platform, I think the integrated data sets and data repositories are very important to develop. So what we're doing towards that, SSHRC is going to have a new strategic plan that will be launched on April 1st, which is in about 4 days for 2016 and 2020. And those are the 3 main objectives of the strategic plan. It's a pretty simple strategic plan. We kept it simple on purpose. Digital scholarship, data management are very important in all those 3 objectives. First one, we recognize that the research landscape is changing, so we want to be able to support the researchers in data management and all novel research methods that could be used. So we're going to invest in those areas. Second objective, create opportunities for research and training to collaborative activities. We just launched right now, and it's on the website, another digging into data competition at the international level. So this is always a very popular competition at the Canadian level. And finally, connect social sciences and humanities research with Canadian. We also wish to improve, as I said, the dissemination of research across Canada through those tools. So what we've been doing, essentially, there's been a few actions from the Tri-Council agency. There were a few guiding principles in 2010. CIHR, our sister agency, health agency, was the first one to implement an open access policy. But the 3 agencies did manage to have a joint policy that was published in 2015 about open access of publications. And data management and open access of publication is not the same thing. It's something that we hear a lot from the community. We don't want to put our data in the open, so it's publication that is open access. For data, it's more about data management policy that we're developing. So there is a statement of principle that is coming up very soon. I think it's coming up in the few coming weeks. There was a consultation during the summer of 2015. Maybe a few of you remember participating. There were few submissions. Of course, it was during the summer, so there were about 44 submissions that came from different groups. The essential elements of what the comments that we had, there are gaps in physical and human capacity to do the data management. I mean, the expertise does not seem to exist still in the community. Researcher awareness, not all of them were aware of the rational elements of what is data management. That more guidance was needed on data management best practice in general. Lots of comment about, and that was going to be interesting to discuss, lots of comment about the applicability of the statement to the humanities. So that's always a very easy answer, but it doesn't apply to my field of research. We had discussion with researchers, and it was almost always the same comment. Ethical reason, I can share my... maybe you can share the metadata so that someone can talk to you and have access to the data with the right procedure. So it's always interesting. Balancing disciplinary freedom and interoperability. So choose your own standard of choice. So that's still a big pressure within the community. I want to manage my data as I want to manage it. I don't want to be imposed a forced structure, which is necessary if we want to be able to exchange data. So what's the following, what's happening in the next few weeks in spring and summer? First, we're going to engage at the Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences, which happened end of May, early June in Calgary this year. Always a big moment for humanities and social sciences every year. So we are organizing meetings with scholarly association executives just to test with them about the implementation of that data management policy within their own field of expertise. They're all going to have, different consideration if you're in sociology or in philosophy. We're gonna organize more concretely data management plan, a focus group, and we're going to invite, for the ones who are familiar with the SHRC programs, we're going to invite the partnership principal investigators, the funded partnership, the actual funded partnerships, and the new ones that are being funded in one-day workshop where we're just going to develop with them a data management plan for their partnerships. And we're going to test the system with them and see how it goes and how to implement that in the next competition. Because the idea that we could just add another section in the forms for the grant proposal saying, please fill that data management plan. The first thing that we realized is that the review committees did not even have the expertise to review the data management plans. So let's take it one step at a time and see what we can build that way. There's going to be also a complementary exercise of a data management survey. So just to expand a bit our knowledge of what's happening in the community. So that's about it, what we're going to do in the next few weeks. And with that, I think I'm going to stop my talk right there and invite the panel members to join in front so that we can start the discussion. So before we start, I thought that maybe we could just have a quick tour of the different panelists so that they could introduce themselves in a 1, 2, 3 minutes, according to the amount of information that they are willing to share. And just so that we better understand, the perspective to which they are participating this afternoon. So I guess we'll start to my left, if your microphone is working. Yeah, or not.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. It's been really fascinating talks. So I'm Amanda Clarke. I'm an assistant professor with the School of Public Policy and Administration here at Carleton. I started here about a year and a half ago. My research is mostly focused on public policy and public management and civil society. I'm particularly looking at how governments and civil society groups are coming to terms with the new forms of data made available to them through digital technologies, how this can be applied to improve services, to improve the way they inform and shape public policy, and the way in which they collaborate with other sectors. I think I'm really excited for the chat today because I've sort of been doing a lot of thinking lately about whether or not my discipline in particular, so public administration, is sort of up for the challenge of the sort of age of big data and the proliferation of new data sources and new methods for interpreting those data. And I think also kind of joining a department where maybe that hasn't been on the mind so much, coming from a department at Oxford where it was all they thought about. So it was the Internet Institute and sort of really on the cutting edge of developing frameworks for sort of how do we do ethics clearances for some of these new types of data when the ethics board hasn't thought about them yet, or how do we train master's students who are going to go into any number of careers after they finish this degree? How do we teach them the old methods, but also the new methods? And how can we foster more collaborative relations between different departments, between those who maybe have the skills and then those who understand the data and its context and which questions are interesting to ask? So I hope we can get into some of those questions today. I think that's what this panel is going to really be focused on. So I'm looking forward to hearing from the others and also to hearing from you with your questions.
Hi, I'm Marcellus Mindel, and I'm the head of the Center for Advanced Studies at the IBM Canada Software Lab. Really, we do research with academics, joint research, and also curriculum development, and it's a real fun gig. So I'm enjoying it very much.
Can you hear me? I'm Vikesh, and I'm going to break the mold, I think, in the spirit of sort of cross-functional team leadership. I'm actually in the health informatics and sort of government sort of regulatory area, so not social sciences, but I think everything that Dr. Bérubé sort of described hits home from Health Canada perspective. So we're part of the Health Products and Food branch, which basically is the FDA Canada. Unfortunately, I have to brand ourselves with the US FDA. We essentially regulate pharmaceuticals, biologics, medical devices across the full life cycle. So I'm basically in charge of all the implementation of standards as well as informatics across the department. We're starting a new sort of center of excellence for data science. From our perspective, from a government perspective, we see huge application. And sort of similar to the first panelist, we're sort of behind the curve as it applies to other regulators, US FDA, Europe, as well as in terms of embracing data science and sort of analytics as part of our core regulatory government business. One of the things that we do from a regulatory perspective is we essentially regulate the commodities that you guys buy in the market. You got 13,000 pharmaceutical products that we regulate, prescription drugs per year, 35,000 medical devices, 75,000 natural health products, as well as over-the-counter medications. These are things that we regulate through the full life cycle. So preclinical, right? So animal studies, bioassays, to clinical, phase 1, 2, 3, 4 trials to market authorization, to post-market surveillance, right? So benefit, risk, and uncertainty in data is our business. Uncertainty obviously exists through the whole sort of testing of benefit risk through the full life cycle. All that's based on data management as well as analytics. Then it gets in the real world, right? Post-market surveillance, monitoring adverse events. That's where the huge opportunity exists right now. We've got a very traditional approach in terms of what we call spontaneous reports. So industry, consumers, and physicians submit adverse reaction reports to us that we have to analyze, make sense of, and make decisions on. And it takes months, if not years, to do. There's other sources of data right now that we have to leverage, and which is where data science and big data analytics is going to become a huge opportunity as it applies to things like social media monitoring, as well as looking at data sources within the healthcare system. Right, so the conversation on interoperability becomes really, really important from a regulatory standpoint around what are the things that we're seeing as opposed to from a passive perspective in the active surveillance context. So in other words, looking at the health records, looking at the narrative text within electronic health records and making decisions on benefit risk once the commodities are on the market. So from our perspective, there's a huge opportunity. There's a capacity gap from a government standpoint that we're trying to bridge at the moment. The first thing is partnering with guys like you or the Institute here of Data Science to bring graduate students into our facilities to participate as part of our Center of Excellence. Partnership models including, we talk about open data and open government. We've got a whole curation process that's just making our data and approved medication information accessible into the healthcare system as well. And then, of course, partnerships with industry as well. So the capacity gap is really kind of the reason why I'm here today and why Health Canada, I think, as an organization, is looking to bridge that by leveraging these partnerships, specifically here at Carleton University as well as other academic institutions. So really appreciate having the conversation.
So my imposter syndrome is through the roof right now. So I'm Shawn Graham. I'm in the history department. I'm associate prof there, and I'm associate prof of digital humanities. So I also teach the core MA program in the digital humanities collaborative MA, rather similar to the data science MA. It's smeared across 12 different programs, and so I'm working with those students, which is really rewarding. The kinds of things that I'm interested in at the moment, I like to break things. In the words of Amy Morrison, who's a prof of English at Waterloo, I fart around on the internet a lot. And the kinds of things that I'm interested in are the ways that historical knowledge gets constructed algorithmically and what that does to our students, or what that does to for lack of a better term, lay people, and how that plays into policy and how that plays into ed technology or the political economy of the university more generally. When I break things, I like figuring out why that broke. And so part of my whole practice has always been in writing tutorials to get other people along where I'm going. And this culminated in the publication of a textbook on big historical data, the historian's macroscope. Run, don't walk to Indigo and buy a copy now. In my head, I imagined more laughter right there.
That's good. That's
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. 10% off.
Yeah.
But actually, it's quite important because as Dominique, you were saying earlier about you've been in the game for 20 years and things don't seem to move around. The only book previous to that in history, at any rate, was already 10 years out of date. And in internet terms, an awful lot happens in 10 years. So I'm interested in these things, in data mining. I've got astigmatism in both eyes. I don't understand necessarily why we have to visualize data all the time. I'm interested in sonifying data. I'm interested in hearing data, tasting data, touching data. Part of this comes from my previous life as Eastern Canada's only Roman stamped brick expert from the 1st to 3rd centuries. You haven't lived until you've been to a stamped brick conference. So this is a lot of fun. Talk about big data. I mean, these things weigh about 20 pounds per brick. So. Well,
Yeah.
you drop it on your fingers, that's the end of your digits.
So maybe I can jump in there. Maybe I can jump on one of your comments about digital humanities. Maybe it's one of the things that we sort of encounter in the community of of the ones who call them digital humanists. Is that it sometimes can be a pretty closed circle of scholars together, developing tools, very interesting tools, but to generalize, develop often on a specific data sets. So their generalization and their portability to other data sets is not always easy. And also the fact that the process of developing the tools is their research by itself for many of them. So their goal is not that everybody else would use the same tool. So at some point it's very difficult to get out of the, one of the things that I find is that it was difficult outside of the digital humanists that are very versed in all those tools and the computer techniques and everything. It would be so useful if the general other researchers could be taught and that it could be brought within their curriculum, the integration of digital humanities within their own scholarship. And it's the bridge between the two that I found difficult to do. I don't know if you encountered the same in your department in history or in science policy or...
Well, I mean, certainly my entire shtick is failing in public and trying these things and getting it out. And I've never seen the point of developing tools that only I and my team can use. So while there might be the one perfect tool that does X, Y, Z, I find I get a lot more traction if I repurpose something else. And in thinking through that repurposing and thinking through how that tool was originally meant to find something else, that brings up lots of interesting pieces. I only started getting any traction at all as an academic once I started giving it all away. And this is something that I try and build into my students. And so with time, things perhaps change.
If you want to, is it the same in your field of study?
On giving it away and sharing. I mean, I think that's one of the big challenges right now that we face is there aren't a lot of reward structures in place that kind of promote a more open approach to sharing your tools, to sharing your data. And I think there is unfortunately there are a lot of people that study government talk about open data and open government, but we ourselves are very closed. I don't know. I take the point. I think it's a really interesting one that actually your ability to get cited and your reputation can be furthered by being more open in your approach. And I think that's something to be tested that we haven't seen happen in sort of the public administration field yet. I think the other thing too is it's really hard to sell the idea that there's kind of like a first mover problem. It's like we need to all start sharing and we all benefit from that sharing and we can link up our data and do interesting things with it. But it's a bit of a collective action problem right now. And so it's quite a proprietary world still. And so what I'd like to see is the university, they've done a good job of trying to promote open source journals to us. So that's something that on my tenure application counts. Here's the thing is it doesn't count as much as publishing in the top ranked journal in my field, which isn't open source. So there are still some kind of problematic incentives at play here, but they could go one step further and say any data that we fund through Carleton grants you have to make the data set open because it's funded through the university, and we think we want to foster a more open approach to this. That would be a really interesting move. I think SSHRC could think about going that route, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective on whether other sort of big national granting bodies are including sort of an open data policy into the way they fund. And you can make the argument pretty clearly from a public policy perspective. If government is funding this research, then one of the outputs of that should be that the data set is publicly usable. And I think it would align very nicely, if you're writing a briefing note on this to the minister, it would align very nicely with an open government platform. Technically, my research is funded by SSHRC right now. Thank you very much. I'm a big fan of that. And
you were good.
maybe I should be part of the open government commitments on releasing data. So there's just a lot of, I think, thoughtful work that could be done in the groundwork to realign incentives and to restructure how some of these grants work. And that would be a really fascinating move that I think the social sciences hasn't been great at yet. It's certainly not in public administration. I don't ever hear people talk this way about their data sets. It's all very guarded.
So there's a lot of really interesting themes worth picking up on there, Matt. I mean, the idea that ultimately there needs to be a stick, like the funding agency needs to say, you have to do this, you have to share, or no money for you, is one element. But also the thing you sort of described, this reverse prisoner's dilemma of like, if everybody talks, it's great, but if only one person talks, then they get burnt. And I think that really comes back to a point made this morning from the Algonquin student, the question they were asking about, to what extent should we be open and what kind of, what are the security issues around that? And I think it's a if you look at it as a personal question, it's really about whether you want to share or not, and you're willing to accept those risks. And there's also, discussion, I think, it was Dave Thomas and others brought up the notion that, it's really hard for us to assess the risks of things. So we're not sure, like there could be a terror attack. So, how risky is that? How likely is it? Or should we be terrified right now that we're going to be struck by lightning or hit by a car or, die in the bathroom? Or what is the real terror attack? So when it comes to that kind of sharing, we're not sure what the benefits are. They seem kind of vague. Like, somehow somebody else could help us with our research. But from a consequences perspective, it usually becomes much clearer. Like, don't put up pictures of your kids because someone will steal them from you, or don't whatever it is, right? Like it's how much of your LinkedIn profile you share or whatever. But fundamentally, it's I think about assessing those risks and deciding which world you're in, the closed world or the open world, and what research tells us, I think what game theory tells us, is that open wins over closed, and that it's an illusion, that the people who hold things very tightly and keep their ideas very tightly, they have a scarcity mentality, like this is the only idea they're ever going to have that's really good. And so they may have it, for example, an idea for a startup company, but they're not going to talk to angel investors about it. They're not going to talk to their friends about it or anyone, because this is their idea, and they're concerned that someone else will either tell them it's a bad idea or take that idea, put a twist on it, and make more money faster and better than they ever could. But those are both actually good things. And I think that's the part. One of to me, one of the canonical stories of open data is sort of Ian Telfer and Goldcore, and the whole idea that they wanted to make their seismic data available and let people figure stuff out. And there was a lot of concern in the company, like, wait a minute, other people look at this and they'll go, oh, the gold's actually here, and they'll buy adjacent plots and they'll do all this other stuff. And Telfer was like, well, our biggest problem right now is we have plenty of land that we don't know where the gold is. So our problem is preventing other people from hypothetically getting some value out of our stuff. And I think that's the other element of it, right? Just to wrap up, is that if we're concerned about what other people might be able to do with our data, but we're not concerned as much about what we want to do with it and whether someone else could help us, because that was another really important theme, was the idea that, it's the people from outside your discipline, the interloper, the random person on the street, the guy who knows nothing that you talk to. And I mean, I had that experience myself in the Center for Advanced Studies long time ago. We were working on an idea that looked like it was going to move to patent, and there was a student, and they were from the University of Waterloo, so obviously they were tremendously awesome. We should have worshipped them, but we didn't. And we were having this conversation, and they just interloped in there, and they said one sentence, and we all looked at that person. We said, this person has just made the most stupid, irrelevant, and useless point. Wait a minute. No, that's the solution to the whole thing. And that was, that's sort of how it goes. I think we've all had those experiences And if we had that conversation in a closed boardroom just amongst ourselves, that would probably never amount to anything. And I think that's where the real value of open and real open research is.
Yeah, and from a Health Canada standpoint, I can tell you. Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah. Sort of there's two different dimensions when it comes to sort of open government and what I call the Creative Commons, right? And sort of creating the ability and expanding our capacity, if you will, to beyond our institutions, because we don't have the answers to all these questions. The first is we did a lot of good job, I think a couple years ago when we initiated this sort of an open initiative known as the Health Product Register, which is, and it really wasn't about publishing more information, it was about creating an open data framework where it was more accessible. Because we did a really good job of publishing information, but nobody could find stuff on our, like on our website. Right, you got to just like caregivers, patients. If you ask them what medications are you on, what are the adverse events associated with that, and how do I lodge an adverse event to Health Canada if I have one? That took something like 64 clicks. It's just basic, right? So we said, okay, we need to just change the whole dynamic around structuring our data, being very deliberate around curation, being very deliberate around being better custodians of our data and understanding what our utilization requirements were in terms of all the cross-sections of folks that are consumers of our data, whether it's app developers, whether it's consumers or physicians or research scientists. And so having that approach sort of as part of your, I call it publication pipeline, and establishing that pipeline so that you've got the data available in the right format, at the right time to the right stakeholder needs to be part of the whole philosophy that goes into the publication model, and we've now seeing sort of dividends from that as well. One of the things that we're going to be starting to do is, and part of the side effect of not being open in terms of just our data sources is all of our approved medication, Health Canada approves all the benefit risk medication information that you guys take. Sometimes that's not even used in the healthcare system, because the systems that are used by physicians in hospitals can't get access to approved Health Canada information because it's not in the right format, or the vendor bought it from somebody else that purchased from the FDA, and therefore, so now you've got data in front of physicians that are not even based on what's been approved in the Canadian context. So opening up our data just is the right thing to do, but part of that, like I said, it needs to be a philosophy around ensuring that we understand who our target stakeholders are, and that we've got that sort of that publication model and that principle around curation and sort of custodianship applied across that whole framework. The second aspect, which is more novel, which I'm seeing happen across multiple agencies as well, is given, and I think you talked about this last year around we're making all this investment in getting things digital, but we're not getting sort of anything out of it. We now have a whole digital framework around capturing electronic submissions, drug information, adverse event information. Now actually we have to do some analysis on that information. And so a lot of the data mining methodologies and computational frameworks that are published currently globally right now, there needs to be an open forum for that to happen so that governments can leverage best practices around data mining as well as methodologies as part of our work when we're looking at things like looking for signals for safety events, for example. So there's going to be another sort of Creative Commons I'm seeing happening. The US FDA is doing a great job with their Open FDA initiative around publishing a lot of their algorithms and sort of data mining methodologies on GitHub, right? So you're going to see a lot of that happening as well for governments in terms of publishing our computational frameworks within the Creative Commons and then getting feedback on that and applying that within a sort of a government decision risk management context, right? So I see sort of two dimensions, open data as well as sort of best practices as it applies to data mining methodologies and creating an open framework around that.
Do you have an API?
Yes.
Sweet.
Absolutely. Right? That's all part of that publication principle, right?
Yeah.
Got to have an API as well. Yeah.
Well, I basically, imagine trying to teach history students about an API and how to use it. So,
or a pharmacology student, because it's an active pharmaceutical ingredient.
Yeah.
So you got to change the terminology, right? So
yeah.
What's an API?
But well, indeed.
Yours sounds better than mine.
Yeah.
If we go back to the topic of the panel, about the needs and opportunity and what is needed in the sector, I guess curation of data is a very big topic there. A question that SSHRC asks itself very often, say, okay, who's responsible of that curation? Because obviously there's going to be resources involved. The academic community is very attached to its data. The councils do not want to fund research infrastructure because they think that if they put their finger into that new thing, it's going to be an endless cost. The institutions usually react saying, well, we don't even have enough indirect costs to fund libraries and IT and universities. You want us to additionally curate all the data. And is it the best way to curate the data? Well, within an institution, as opposed to do a bit like the astrophysician did and other groups, just to, on the contrary, put similar data together so that it generates more interest and that you have the right community to curate the data. So it's a bit like, in fact, again, publishing. It's do you make an integrated platforms where you really integrate and describe your data, or do you leave the responsibility to each institution in an open access, repository that is more or less used by the researchers?
There's so many, I mean, you just opened up.
Open.
Certainly, the situation that was expressed, the access to the data wasn't so much that the data was open, but also that the infrastructure and the platform and the formats, everything, all had to be open. Otherwise, it just didn't matter. Correct. But the bigger thing there is there's an impression that all data is great, and if you collect it, you'll find some way to like co-create value and monetize it if you're keeping it all, even if it is Roman pressed brick.
There's big money in brick.
Yeah, it just it's like that's but.
I'm sorry.
The big but is that I think it comes back to the, you're talking about the Creative Commons, and then, of course, also the whole notion of things that are held in common. So there's all kinds of things that are given too much attention because they're held in common, like common pastures always overgrazed, international waters are always overfished. But then you have data, which is, in some sense, incredibly important to all of us, but not important enough to care at all, really. And because of the pace of technology, data gets left behind. It's in formats that you can't, like my undergraduate stuff is all on a bunch of floppy disks in a toolbox, and I'm like, I don't want to get rid of it because I feel like that took 4 years of my life, but someday I'm just going to just dump the thing. I even have an old 5 1/4 drive just waiting for the time when I get an urge in the middle of the night to download an assignment that Professor Thomas over there gave me so long ago. But realistically, it's not going to happen. But the survivability of this data and the ability to really use it, those are things that are not going to be monetized. They're not really commercial concerns, but they have to be the concerns of somebody.
Is all data interesting?
To somebody.
Yeah,
well,
totally.
That's your job.
That is the
That's why we're
question.
here.
The question also is, how can you know? How can you know whether this data is going to be interesting or not? I mean, there's all kinds of longitudinal studies where they try to collect absolutely as much as possible, right? Like even things like collecting the blood samples and freezing them just in case there's going to be some future diagnostic test on blood, and they'd like to be able to go back that period of time. And I don't think we have that quite that same intent with what we do as researchers. Like we do it for us. But how and what's the structure? What's the magic ontology of all information that everything fits into?
This is where big data learns from the humanities and learns from archival theory and learns from the central. I mean, all of this points to the increasing role and increasing importance of the library as an institution. Data as publication, libraries are publishing houses. And if we stop paying ransoms to Elsevier and to other places to get our own research back to us and put that money instead into supporting the people in our libraries who are building the repositories, doing the hard archival work of figuring out what needs to be kept and under all of these questions that you've raised. This is these things are out there, and this is what drives me nuts about impact factors and the concern with the prestige. The only reason these journals are prestigious is because of network effects, and they've been around long enough. So I don't say, burn it all down, let's start again, and stop paying the ransoms and pour that money into the libraries and the library professionals whose jobs and expertise and theoretical backgrounds are expressly around these issues, and let them provide guidance to us and make them, full research partners in all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think what's really fascinating in what's happening right now in academia is that the publishing world is becoming much more data-driven through things like impact factors and citation rankings and bibliometrics. But what most of that is revealing is that these journals are entirely meaningless and a waste of time because so little is actually read, and the stuff that is read is precisely just because it's in the journal that claims to be the best because it has the reputation and there's path dependencies at play, right? I think where it becomes interesting in the context of thinking about this interdisciplinary research that necessarily comes with working with new types of data, when you're coming from a social sciences perspective, for example, or humanities, is it's sort of like a fish can love a bird, but where will they live? And I sometimes wonder if I collaborate with a computer scientist and we have a really excellent paper, the way they're going to want to communicate that, the things they'll need to prioritize in the journal that they're, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm too self-interested about all this, but let's think about the incentive structure. So the tenure requirements for that computer science assistant professor are going to be to get that into a top-ranked computer science journal, whereas for me, that won't look very good on my application because my colleagues who are all public policy experts and study government will think, what the hell is that? Like, I don't know what journal that is. Why do I care about its impact factor in computer science? And also, never mind the incentive structure, but just, in terms of feeding into your discipline and adding back knowledge to your stakeholders. So are they going to understand those journals and the way they communicate? So that's, I think, a whole other reason to start thinking about why we're siloing off our knowledge into these sort of differently ranked journals by discipline. It doesn't really work well for the kinds of findings and the kinds of data and the kinds of analysis we're talking about. I mean, maybe a third reason to get rid of our traditional journals is that we still make them with the assumption that everyone is printing them off and sitting in a great hall and reading them. And so they don't allow for the interactive visualizations that can really help you interpret this types of data. They don't allow for, even the number of times you hand in an article for review and they say you can't have this many tables or you can't use color. And, that's a huge problem, never mind the bigger things we want to start doing with this data.
Unless you pay. If you pay, you'll get color.
And unless you want. So there's just so many good reasons to rethink the publishing model, but I think a lot of it is going to have to be that the big players, probably the big universities, are going to have to get on board with not evaluating research by whether or not it ended up in a journal with a high impact factor. And that's a pretty big institution to try to shift, a pretty big mindset. I've had this conversation with other scholars in my field about why are we all publishing? Trees are falling in the woods and another person gets tenure. Like no one's reading anything we're doing, but we're also happy that we're publishing. It's completely ridiculous. So I don't know, but people are just really happy about where they've published recently. So there's a big cultural mind shift that needs to take place
it's
here.
so reassuring to know that it's absolutely just as futile as everything else that everyone else is doing.
But we've been discussing.
Yeah.
We've been discussing about open access policy for journals and articles for more than 20 years, and the progress is there, but it's still limited. And I guess the big publishers, they do know how to adapt, sometimes faster than we do, to the reality and develop new business model. But is a sharing of data set going to have a similar impact, and should we aim for the same thing? And how do we generate interest to those data sets? This is something that was mentioned by Vikesh, I guess. You put it on the web, nobody's going to come and see you. The way that we structure our data, that we put, even said, like the SSHRC website, I can say it, I've been there for 5 months. I think I'll use Google to find something on the SSHRC website. It's that level of and it's a small website. It's not CIHR or Health Canada.
The challenge can be whether you're looking at a push model or a pull model, where you're trying to push all your data out there, or you have someone with a problem that's looking for data, and then you can curate and give that to them. So it's not just everything's available, but there's a reason associated with that data.
That's a good.
I just really wonder though about the point that you raised, Amanda. Really, that the fundamental measure for every academic is publication, and that's what everything's based on, and it's based on these journals, and that's just how it is. And how could you even contemplate changing that? And yet, it really does have to change. Although you can rest confidently assured that IBM Watson is reading every one of your publications, and stuff from Google and others are also eagerly reading that, digesting it, and sharing that information internally and developing some kind of ontology, and all this other good stuff's happening. But how else would you measure your success or effectiveness if it wasn't for publications in journals that no one reads?
Yeah, and there are questions around peer review and quality control, but there have been a number of other projects that benefit from digital technologies where I think we've been able to sort of rethink how we produce and disseminate knowledge in a way that's highly accurate. Wikipedia comes to mind. I see a few people in the room go, what? But I think that, I agree we have to work through a number of logistics about peer review and quality and all these kinds of things, but I just think we can get there. It just takes some creative thinking about, if you were to design academic publishing now from the ground up, what would it look like? It would not look at all like the system of journals that we have. It just wouldn't. And I love your point that if we got rid of these subscriptions, it would just free up so much money for our libraries to do what they're really good at, and which is what we keep coming back to, is we need more sophisticated information management strategies. We need people to help us set up and work with our databases. We need curators, and those are skills that, your point, who's going to do that? How are we going to fund that?
But we also have to normalize this at the level of undergraduates, though. Right. Because be the digital guy in the history department and do something that doesn't look like an essay with your history students. And they've already internalized the idea that page counts equals scholarliness, that a 40-page paper is somehow more mystically enlightening than a 20-page paper, knowing full well that there's 100 people in the room and I am not going to be able to read all this stuff, right? So again, they're already replicating this. They're writing papers that nobody reads as undergraduates. So it's seriously. Apocryphally, I had a prof as an undergrad who apparently threw things down the stairs, and the heaviest papers got an A.
Yeah.
But
that's an urban myth.
That's an urban myth, I'm sure. I've tried it; it doesn't work. But the point is, so I turn up at Carleton, and they say, "Okay, you teach the historian's craft, you the historical methods course," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm an archaeologist." But anyways, initially I was very apologetic about folding digital things into my teaching with the students, and they pick up on that. They're like, "Well, this guy doesn't have the courage of his convictions. I'm not going to be doing any of this stuff." They might not frame it like that, but that's the sum total. So now it's just, I'm sorry, folks, you are maintaining an open research notebook on GitHub for all of your research this term, and we're going to deal with that. And so you do it without apologies and start with undergraduates, because then they go into other people's classes and they've already internalized or learned whatever it is I'm trying to teach them. So I've got a colleague who teaches medieval history who has a student now writing a peasant simulator in Python as her final project, and he's like, how do I grade this? How do I deal with this? And I said, oh, well, this is what you do. So I end up with a lot more work because whatever, but then it translates into the discussion you have at the department where they say, well, how do we know they're not skiving off if they do digital work? How do we make sure that and it's, again, constant refrain, page numbers doesn't equal scholarly. And maybe eventually we hit that phase transition where it goes from being something odd and added on and top down imposed to something that percolates upwards and people just naturally expect, why haven't you put your notes online? What's wrong with you? What are you hiding?
Yeah, so how do you actually quantify outcomes is really what it comes down to. Not in terms of just metrics of counting things like pages or students or assignments or marks or things like that, but actually how, what has happened. And I think that is also the key to resolving some of the other dilemmas. Because if you take it from the perspective of a researcher who spent years collecting a data set, and they're now at the point where they're ready to dive deeply into that and to generate, the publications, right? But they're terrified about sharing this data set with others because they're concerned that others will also dive into their data set and generate the publications, perhaps before them, thereby negating the value of their publications and all their work. And yet, the real value is not in the publications, but it was in the work in creating the data set, but that's not effectively monetized in any way on campus, right? It's the publication that is.
Well, you can write the paper about the creation of the data set. You can embargo the data set until your own paper comes out first. Like, I'm sure that there are ways of getting around these things as long as we're not.
Yeah, but maybe it's not about getting around it. Maybe that is the creation of the data set, and as we heard earlier, the cleansing of it really is the real work. It's the 80% of the work.
Publication of the data set should be.
Producing that could possibly be. So then you have a data set that you publish.
Yep.
And people that use your data set, those are the references. And that's how you gain credibility. The more people that access that data set, and the better you make it. And then you're actually not, in a sense, producing insights at all. You're producing the raw material for other people to generate insights on. It becomes perhaps enabled because of the knowledge era and because we can all walk around with these 10 terabyte little sticks in our pockets. So,
Sounds like Wikipedia.
Could I pick up on the point, though, you raised about students? Because we've been talking a lot about the research side of it, but a whole other side of this is how, in humanities and social sciences, we need to rethink our curriculum in light of these new sources of data and methods and ways of knowing. And, I mean, we recently redesigned our Masters of Public Administration, and, you know, there's questions about our methods course. So do you bump some of the older stuff out because now we need to bring in these new things? Or do you just add them on top? And so then there's a question of, like, how do you fit all that into a 12, seminar methods class? Like, if now we also have to have sufficient training in how to work with large data sets and how to do maybe social network analysis or how to do predictive analytics, all these kinds of things that we never used to do. So there's just an organized, like, where does this fit in? I think one model is to do, a collaborative master's model like we have at Carleton right now, which I think is great, and I think we should be getting in on the School of Public Policy, because whenever I talk to people in government, they say, please send people my way who have these skills. But what happens to the other students? Like, should they get a baseline knowledge, at least, of how to interpret and to intelligently consume some of these analyses? Is that even realistic? And I think we're really grappling with it. We're not really sure how to fit that into a traditional master's program. There's also a capacity gap because the professors who are teaching these courses are new to this stuff, and they were never trained in it, and a lot of them don't use these tools. I think what's at stake is really that we are producing students who maybe aren't equipped to be the best researchers and the best public servants or the best, whatever field they happen to go into if they don't understand these things. But how can we realistically fit it in? So I'm genuinely puzzled about how to do this, and I try to incorporate these methods and new types of data and into all my classes so that at least they get exposed to it. But it's not enough, and you almost feel like you're shortchanging them a little bit. I don't know. That's more of a question for everybody else here. I don't know how to do it.
We do have a minor in digital humanities at the undergrad level, and so again, these weird things like the data science MA, the digital humanities MA, the minors, they smear on top of all these things, but maybe that's how we do it. We build capacity out of each other's departments, and we get out of our freaking silos.
Yeah,
Right.
and I mean, from a government perspective, these are brand new methodology because we are huge institutions as well, right? And so methodologies that we're employing right now, just to answer the right question, or at least understand what the right question is, in the Data Science Center of Excellence that we're starting, is really getting together folks from the policy area, from the informatics area, from the pharmacoepidemiology area, right? And basically everybody works collectively towards internalizing what the question is, because it makes sense, and then walking through a process by which we all achieve a successful outcome. And that institutional, because government is legislation, policy, process, culture. That's the value chain. It's the same thing here, and we react to obviously to compelling events like, health crises, or obviously political change as well, right? And so, talk to folks in the government, say 20, 30 years ago, talk about open data, open government, it would have been just like forget about it, right? So we've changed that because from mainly politically, because culturally right now, folks are still of the mindset, this is our information, this is not our information to share, right? So it seems like that institutional culture, right, needs to have some sort of compelling event that will shift the paradigm. If not, you're depending on grassroots, right? And so, which is just doing the right thing.
So it's also about where the drag really is, because we can talk about culturally, what is the culture? But I think as a culture generally, we're much more accepting of diverse and inclusive things. But the challenges arise when we look at our systems and our infrastructure and our policies, right? So, for example, in IBM, we're very interested in T-shaped people as well. We want people that have a breadth across things. And of course, you get an undergraduate student buys into this totally. They take a combination of all kinds of different things. They pop out knowing that they're a superior form of life and they should have no trouble getting a job. And then we go, yeah, we want 20 Java programmers. And you're like, well, I've taken one course in Java. Really? Because everybody else here has taken 15. So, thanks. Thanks for coming out. Because the door is not T-shaped, it's an I-shaped door. You have to get inside first, and then after 10 years, you can go in your cocoon and you can turn into the interdisciplinary butterfly and everything's good then, you can float about. But until then, you must, eat those leaves and just dig away day after day. And I think from an academic perspective, it's the same thing, right? Like if you really wanted to be interdisciplinary, then what journal do you publish in or where do you belong? Because it's the fish and the bird thing, right? How do you really get rid of that? Because you can look at the world of where all of the blue people are here and all the red people are there, and these are physicists and those are mathematicians, and then you have the computer scientists, and that's the way universities are arranged, and yet we want to mix all the colors together and have rainbows everywhere. Doesn't it sound rainbows and butterflies? It sounds so fantastic that
That was the title of my tenure portfolio: Rainbows and Unicorns.
So how is that?
Well, you still have to tell a story, right? You don't necessarily have to be playing the game by the other rules that we have received. If you tell the good story, the compelling story, you change the game. And I mean, when I went up for tenure and promotion, I had a lot of years in the academic wilderness before I started at Carleton. Right. And so I had to tell the story, well, what the hell were you doing, guy? Right. And so the story becomes, and I put my online and tenure portfolio completely online as well to make the act of going through the process transparent and underline where the value was coming from there. Scary as hell, but I did it. Ironically enough, I had to turn it into a PDF so that the senior administration would read it. Yeah, it really cheesed me off. I do sound work for crying out loud. But
Sorry.
Well, no, it was absurd. But you tell the story. You tell the compelling story. I mean, that's... If humanities has anything at all to offer big data stuff, it's how to tell a damn good story, right? And to find the meaning in it all.
Sure.
Well, I'll give you an alternate viewpoint. I think that we really have to be like cancer. And what I mean is, if you take a theory of organizations that says that from outside there are the market forces or whatever, let's call it reality just to simplify it, that's impinging on this institutional organism. And from inside, there's the corporate antibodies that attack anything a little bit unusual or strange. And so to be an agent of change in any of those organizations, you have to appear like what you're doing is exactly like everything that everyone's always done. So the corporate antibodies look at that and they go, oh no, it's just a perfectly normal research project from one department, looks fine to me. Yeah, one grad student, yeah, all good. But secretly, you are engaging in interdisciplinary weirdness and all kinds of ways that would be very alarming, and it's going to spread. It's going to eventually change the whole thing.
I'm going to put that on my
anybody
office
would
door.
like to challenge the panel on the floor and ask a question?
Okay. You know what I did with that? Can you hear? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Dina Chancer from the Public Health Agency, and sort of as you were discussing up here, I don't know if I have quite the humor to add into some of this, but there are two working models that may be of a lot of interest. One is the journal called LOS1.
Plus one.
You may have heard it, you may not. I've gone through Scopus, this is what we have available to check citations, etc., and it seems to be the most popular journal for people in the Public Health Agency. It is interdisciplinary, though most of the work I see out of it is still very siloed. That doesn't really stop any of it. On top of that, not only are they an open journal, which agrees with the government policy for access to the academic work that's actually published, they also have open data sets and open models. So if you're doing a modeling study, they want your model available online, and your data, they want that available unless there are a good reason not to publish it, like it comes from StatsCan, and I don't really, third-party data set. And so they will have reasonable restrictions, but if you're a PI on a study, that doesn't make any sense that you can't share it. It's your data. You can share it. You want to publish, you can share it. And they seem very successful. So PLS 1 seems to have addressed a lot of the questions that you've been debating up here, and I just thought I would mention that one. The other question that came up was StatsCan. They recently had a methodology seminar last week, actually, and what they do with the open data in terms of being able to find it is they leave it like CanSim and everything that's available publicly. It's on their website. It's not in the government open access. So the data actually lives there. And so all the documentation, all the metadata you want about it, everything is all in their data set. And then through the open access portal, you can search it through that, or you can search it through the regular StatsCan website. And I think that works fairly well. So the questions that you were having about data management, these are sort of two examples where there is some that people have looked at this. I think PLS 1 uses something, if you don't put it in as a supplementary file with your research paper, which again will be found as soon as you find the paper through PubMed and wherever else you're going to search for it. They also have a system, I think it's called Dyad. I haven't seen that used too much, but for larger data sets and stuff like that, you can actually make it available. And so there's a few solutions that I'm familiar with. So my question as this discussion was going on is, what is your data management problem? And certainly it's been a bit enlightened here, but those two solutions may be something you want to look at.
Any reaction from the panel? Are you aware of those?
Oh yeah. Go ahead. Well, I don't have anything in there, but there's a thing called the Open Library of the Humanities, which takes a very similar approach, and it's funded through a consortium of public universities that continues to gather steam. So they have one kind of super journal where all the different submissions percolate up through that, but then it can be separated out into separate disciplinary areas. So it's a very similar model. And I guess, of course, there's archive and different things like that. Yeah.
But I guess one about StatsCan and everything, that also supports what the panel was saying about curation, because StatsCan, they have very specific sets of data that everybody knows about. If you're in that field of knowledge, you know what kind of data and if you don't exactly know, you know where to go. StatsCan, that's easy. And every country has a StatsCan. So it's kind of the equivalent of a StatsCan. So that's a good example, that's where you need to put that kind of data, because people will know it will exist and they will have access to it. But it's for all the other kind of data that is just floating around. Where do you put it? Where do you keep it?
Mary O'Keefe from Health Canada. I'm wondering, I'm very interested in this discussion about the sort of, as we'd say in the web world, you're familiar with that term, rot, redundant, out of date and trivial. And it seems to me it kind of applies to the whole business model of academic publishing from what we're hearing today. I started off my career in the publishing business, so it's really interesting to see how it has evolved or has not evolved. So if you contrast academic publishing with the traditional media in the Western world, they've been dealing with digital disruption for many years now, and many of those conventional business models have simply collapsed. And that's one of the main drivers of that is the internet, obviously, and younger people who are more familiar with getting all their streams of information online don't want to pay. So, digital disruption, many have failed, some are going to do better. Newspapers are dying, magazines are still doing well. Like it's a very complex mix, but my question is, how much of this is a generational shift, and at what point do the students sort of rebel and say, what's with these stodgy old journals? Why do we have to read that when I can get so much more current, faster, better integrated information from Google, from BBC News, or anywhere that I have at my fingertips? So at what point does that conventional way of publishing new knowledge just go the way of the dodo bird? Do you get that feedback from students that they find journals sort of a Stone Age thing and they have better access to other information faster? I mean, is that something you hear from students?
I don't necessarily hear that they find better information faster, or when they think it's better, it often isn't.
It often
so there's
isn't, yeah.
a kind of.
But it's faster.
Yeah, are you
Yeah.
scrutinizing your sources type discussion has to have at the beginning of every class, particularly I think with undergrads. But I think that they are frustrated by paywalls. They find the process of, I mean, I was shocked when I started teaching how I needed to sort of actually give them the PDF like saved in a folder for them to access because they didn't want to have to log into the library site. Yeah, like it was shocking. But why I think you won't see the same digital disruption that you saw in, say, traditional media, that in academic publishing, is that, I mean, traditional media did, like its market was legitimately disrupted, and, you know, consumers were able to get good information elsewhere, whereas we still have a pretty strong market for our sort of behind the paywall and type publishing, and it's still the case that that's, again, it's the incentive structure we face, and so you still will see people putting their best stuff in those kind of traditional venues, even though they're not as effective, and even though they themselves find it frustrating. So I think, yeah, maybe over time, as universities put in place, use their levers to try to compel us to become more open in how we publish. Maybe the rise of new types of data and new ways of presenting and communicating research, maybe that will be a push to the industry. That would be quite interesting, is if we just get to the point where the paper journal, the traditional model, and the lag in publishing time that they entail, which we haven't talked much about, but that's, you know, a huge issue. That might be another driver of change in the industry. But I don't think it'll be ever, I don't think right now, at least, it's ever going to be driven by the same kind of, we don't have a market. Because there's a huge market for proprietary sort of behind paywall research.
What about ebooks in the bookstore as opposed to paper books? Has that taken off, or does it replace the paper? Pardon?
They're deliberately broken. In the same way the oligarchies that control academic publishing have successfully convinced us all that we have to play the game by their rules. It's kind of a Stockholm syndrome, really. The ebooks that you get through the official vendors that sell them to the library, the publishers or whatever, they're deliberately broken. They are impossible to work with. One simultaneous user is allowed to look at it at a time. You can't read it on a device. You have to read it on a screen. Stigmatism. You know, all these.
That sounds like a familiar trick for my publishing.
Yeah, and it's expensive. It's very expensive. Yeah, so and as far as like my students are concerned, at any rate, it's not. There is no.
Last question.
I don't know. Apple has successfully convinced everybody that everything should take one click, and when it doesn't, the world is stopped, and I can't do my work.
So maybe the last two questions.
Yes. Sorry.
So if it's not on the first page of Google, they don't read it anyway. So what the heck?
Precisely.
So your whole job is to get everything on the first page of Google, and SEO.
But there isn't even one first page, right? Everybody's first page is different.
It's different based
and I
on
mean,
their
I'm
profile,
sure
yes.
Donald Trump's first page is very, very different from
He is too.
my first page.
Yeah, so the actual thing I was going to mention is, I also took courses from Dave Thomas, and everything was different back then. I did punch cards, and one thing that I accidentally did was I got into the data business. It's very unsexy. We just move data sets for people, like, you know, 400 million records in 16 hours and get it remapped into the new data set. We do that kind of thing for a living. And what I will tell you from experience in working with groups is that there's different information management policies. And I know of a couple of situations in Health Canada, for instance, where you're trying to actually figure out how to maintain records for the next 50 to 75 years. So you actually get, so we'll talk about that. But so you get somewhere. Yeah.
It's never happened, so.
Yeah, so the problem is that the media that people want to put it on is going to evolve. The context is going to evolve. Whoever thought we would have geolocation on everything these days? So we just did a corporate deal for 400 million records being moved to a new database and had to re-geocode a whole bunch of stuff because they didn't actually have geocodes in more than half of the data. So those are the kinds of things that people find as the use for the data set evolves, because there's new technology that comes in place, that kind of thing changes. Plus, all of your information management that you're doing, except for the Roman bricks, which is a whole new experience with digital if you drop it on your toes. Yes. Anyway, what happens there is that the whole thing about all these kinds of data is things in information management and the curating of the data set and the way you collect data and the way you use a taxonomy against it. All of that changes over time. Mm-hmm. So part of this is to also understand who are the stakeholders 10 years from now and what questions are they trying to ask, and not in SQL.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Flat files.
No answers.
Go on. So my question, my name is Sylvia Riley. I'm from Algonquin College. I'm a student there. My question is around reacting to conclusions made from all these data sets. So if we have access to all these data sets, it seems more one way. So an organization will publish it, and there may not be a way to react to the knowledge gained from someone analyzing it. So since we have, like, from Health Canada and a public policy department, I'm wondering if you can speak to how organizations should structure themselves to be able to react to conclusions that are made, and specifically Health Canada. I know, for example, from the FDA that security around health devices, there's a disincentive to make any changes because they have to go through an entire recertification process for even the smallest firmware change. So that knowledge should be reincorporated into the organization. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a couple of parts in your question. The first is on the whole cybersecurity side of things for devices, which is a new field right now from a regulatory perspective around what are the standards and how do we enforce those standards. So that's sort of at the standards development stage at this point in time. There is no sort of commonly applied standard as applies to security on implantable or in vitro in vitro devices. When it comes to sort of reacting, again, we get tons of information. Like I said, our focus the last 5 years has really been going digital, right? And millions of dollars have gone into that, which is a good thing. A lot of the things that we're doing now is where we have to, and this is where data mining analytics are really important, right? And so applying the right methodologies around causation versus correlation. We've got this whole notion of disproportionality analysis as well, to ensure that our decisions are unbiased and obviously based on evidence. And that's going to be based on the wide variety of data sources that we're using. And I said, when it comes to adverse event reporting, that's one collection of data mining and risk management perspectives as well as methodologies. But as we start expanding into other areas as well, then we're going to have to apply sort of a similar lens, right? So I mean, there is no. It all depends on the problem statement, the use case, right? So.
Yeah, I think to speak to your question about feedback loops, like it kind of operates on two levels. You were talking about kind of organizations putting their data out there, right? So from a government perspective, I think the first sort of wave of open data portals were quite disappointing, and one of the reasons why is that a bunch of data was plopped online to sort of die with no feedback loops. So people would use the data and find interesting things or find errors or who knows, and they had no way to communicate that back. So the idea that this could be used to improve policy or for the public to better understand government didn't really operate very well because there was no way to feed back in. Governments have gotten a lot smarter about that now, so what they often have is a kind of comment function attached to each data set, and you can follow through, and sometimes there's quite interesting conversations. To me, that's sort of a really fascinating way that governments are getting more creative about how they collaborate with the public and kind of identifying, in some cases, quite niche communities that can bring new understanding or new context to the data that they have from an organizational perspective. From an academic side, I mean, it could be really interesting if we were reimagining how we communicate our knowledge, if we were to publish and take advantage of the opportunity for real-time dialogue between users via the web. It could be really fascinating to have people question your interpretation or ask, how did you get that data? Or, who knows? The same kind of questions that we ask ourselves when we read any academic journal article, and that if it's our field, we might take note of, and then the next time we write our paper and we do a little lit review, these are the things we highlight as being flawed about that paper or where there were questions unanswered. So it's basically the same thing we've always done. It's just making it more efficient and doing it in real time. It would probably add a fair bit of work to an academic because the process of publishing your research would mean that you'd have to kind of monitor it live for a while, let's say, and have this discussion back and forth. But you could probably save a lot of other time on the back end from the 2-year revision cycles that you're often pushed through, which I don't think are a great way, especially on fast-moving files. And we could do it all just a lot more creatively. I think some of the best researchers that are trying to do that now are those who are often free of the kind of structures or pressures that might mean they don't invest time in that. If I was to do that, my colleagues would say, you're an idiot, don't do that, you won't get tenure. I've actually had profs tell me that, you know. Like,
I met a Nobel Prize who told me he was only publishing in open access journal. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you already have the Nobel Prize, you can do it.
well, exactly, right? Yeah. But I think, but your point is great. There needs to be more of a two-way dialogue around all these data sets, and that's where the interesting work happens.
It is possible to be writing a book open, having people reading the damn thing while you write it, responding to comments, and you, the writer, adapting accordingly, still getting the thing published, still getting tenure, because this is the exact process that we did last year with our big data book for historians. So, I mean, these examples are out there, and if the people in your department are causing you grief, you can say, well, there are other people at this university who've done this sort of thing. Like, it's that blinkered mindset where we've been successfully hazed into becoming academics that we can't imagine other ways of.
Well, I think what you're pointing to is that a lot of the like there are incentives and there are structures and there are systems that need to be reformed, but also as individuals you do have to just be a little bit courageous if we want to see change in the industry, and you have to kind of be willing to put yourself out there. And there's a whole human side to this that we need to be more thoughtful about.
And that's what humanities brings to big data.
So Marcellus, if you want a last word before we give back, we thank our panel and give back the...
I think that the ultimate disruptor here is always cognitive systems, and soon they'll be the ones reading the journals and making the references and spotting the deficiencies and stuff like that. So, and they'll first replace graduate students, but then eventually they'll replace professors, perhaps. So I'll leave it there.
So thank you so much to our panel.
Thank you.
That last discussion reminded me of those old jokes, you know, how many X does it take to change a light bulb? Right? Well, how many academics does it take to change a light bulb? Change? Anyway, let's see, our judges here. So this is the end of the session here. I'm going to move outside and for the poster prizes for graduate students. So if you're in no rush, please come and celebrate with them. We'll draw this to an end, and I thank you so much for assisting in this wonderful day. First thing to do is to put on your calendar Wednesday, the 29th of March next year for Data Day 4.0. So that's your first date.
Is it always going to be the 29th of March?
Not always. No, it might be a Sunday one day.
Because 29th of March is always Smoke and Mirrors Day.
So?
It's a legitimate fake day. But if you look it up, if you search for Smoke and Mirrors Day, it's today.
Anybody got any problems with that? Anyway, I'd like to close first of all by thanking all of our speakers and panelists, panel and chairs and so forth. That's what makes the day. I think you'll all agree that it was an exciting and stimulating day in many ways. I assume if you look in your pockets, you've got all sorts of business cards or notes of people to contact, because that's what this day is about, networking and expanding the range of Carleton's data science initiative. Those of you who came in may have left your business card in the fishbowl at the front. If not, please leave it at the end, because we'll put you then on ensure you're on our mailing list for the Institute for Data Science. Keep up to date with data science initiatives. It's actually on the Carleton website, CUIDS, Carleton University Institute for Data Science. We do have, during the years, you heard many interesting sessions, lectures, discovery lectures, and events. And the more of you, the better, the greater we can strengthen this community. I obviously have to finish by thanking our sponsors who have kindly provided resources for the graduate student prizes, as well as some of the 3 sandwiches over there that are still left. And particularly those who put this together. Is Catherine here? Can someone shout outside for Catherine Elliott, please? Catherine Elliott has really been the mainstay in putting this together. She marshaled the support staff around the university, kept me in order and kept those of you on the program in order, as you probably know. And she is the data science administrator in the School of Computer Science. And without her help, we probably would not have had such a wonderful day. And I think she's hiding. She's coming? So there she is. A big hand to Catherine. And also thank all the people that, of course, you marshaled, because you didn't do this alone. You just pretended you did, right? All the volunteers that helped us make a great day. So, have the judges made their decision? Have we got envelopes? Yes, we got. So, if you'd like just to join me outside, we'll announce the prizes. And once again, thank you. If you have any comments, we'll put a page up on the website for comments and feedback from today, which will help in designing next year's program. Thank you once again.